I'm Clara, a 20-year-old university student. When I moved to a quiet town for school, I stayed with an elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Eddington. They were so kind and welcoming, offering me a cozy room on the second floor of their house. Their 30-year-old son, Elias, lived in a small guest house on the property. He was quiet, distant, and honestly, a little unsettling. I figured he was just reserved. My first night there was peaceful. At first, I unpacked, had dinner with the Eddingtons, and went to bed early since I was exhausted. I fell asleep quickly but woke up in the middle of the night. My heart was pounding, and I didn't know why. Then, I felt it, the weight of someone sitting at the edge of my bed. I froze. Slowly, I turned my head and saw the outline of a figure in the dark. I whispered, "Mrs. Eddington? Mr. Eddington?" No response. My eyes adjusted, and I saw him, Elias. His eyes were open but distant, his head tilted forward. My breath caught in my throat. "Elias?" I whispered, my voice shaky. He didn't respond. Instead, he slowly turned his head to face me. My heart was racing. After what felt like an eternity, he stood up and walked out of the room, leaving the door slightly open. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I joined the Eddingtons for breakfast. I was exhausted but tried to act normal. Then, Elias walked in, calm as ever. He acted like nothing had happened. I watched him carefully, looking for any sign of what I'd seen the night before, but he seemed perfectly normal. I told myself it had to be a dream. That night, I was nervous to go to bed, but I'd had a long day, and I was so tired that I ended up falling asleep quickly. Again, I woke up in the middle of the night. My breath caught when I heard the slow creak of the door. It opened, inch by inch, and there he was, Elias. The faint light from the hallway framed his silhouette. I'm not proud of it, but I pretended to be asleep. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping he'd leave. Instead, he stepped inside, his footsteps slow and deliberate. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he'd hear it. I heard him sit at the edge of my bed. The weight shifted, just like before. Time stretched on forever. Then I heard him lie down next to me. My breath was shallow and fast. Every nerve in my body was screaming, but I didn't move. I couldn't. Finally, I made a plan. Slowly, I inched toward the edge of the bed, 1 inch at a time. Then, with all the courage I had, I threw myself off the bed and bolted for the door. My bare feet pounded on the wooden floor as I ran to the living room. I didn't care how loud I was. I curled up on the couch, wrapping a blanket tightly around me. I didn't sleep all night. The next day, I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I told Mrs. Eddington everything. Her face went pale. She sighed deeply and said, "He's been acting strangely lately, but he's harmless, dear. Don't worry." I wanted to believe her, but I didn't. That night, I dragged my mattress into the living room. I'd sleep there from now on. Even in the living room, I didn't feel safe. Every night, I'd stare at the shadows, convinced something was watching me. One night, I was half asleep when I heard it again, the soft creak of footsteps. My eyes shot open, and I scanned the room. Then I saw him. Elias was standing in the hallway, barely visible in the darkness. He was completely still, just watching me. My chest tightened with fear, and I couldn't look away. I'm not sure how long we stayed like that, but it felt like hours. Then, without a word, he backed away into the shadows. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I'd had enough. I told the Eddingtons I'd found a friend's place to stay. I packed up and left that afternoon. As I walked down the street, I glanced back at the house. Elias was at the upstairs window watching me. I'll never forget that blank stare. I never went back. Years later, I'm still haunted by it. I never told anyone the full story. I didn't think they'd believe me. But I can't forget Elias's eyes, the way they'd lock onto me, like he was waiting for something. Sometimes I dream about that house, the soft creaks of the wooden floor, the glow from the hallway, and the weight of someone sitting on the edge of my bed. My heart still races when I think about it. After I moved away, I started having nightmares. In them, I'm back at the Eddington house, trapped in my old room. The floor creaks louder than ever, and the door swings open slowly. Elias's silhouette fills the frame, but in the dream, he's walking toward me, not standing still. His eyes are locked on mine. I'm paralyzed. I can't scream. I can't move. His hand reaches for me, and just as he's about to touch me, I wake up drenched in sweat. The dreams happen often, each one more vivid than the last. One day, I'm scrolling through social media and see a news article about a missing person. The picture stops me cold. It's Elias. The article says he's been missing for weeks, last seen near the Eddington residence. My hands tremble as I read it. The report mentions he'd been acting strangely before he disappeared. My mind flashes back to those nights at the house, to the way he'd watch me from the hallway. That night, I have a different dream, or maybe it's not a dream at all. I'm not in the Eddington house this time. I'm in my new apartment, lying on my bed. The familiar sound of creaking fills the room. My eyes snap open. The door to my room is slowly swinging open. My chest tightens, and I feel it before I see it. A figure in the doorway, broad shoulders, tilted head. My heart pounds like a drum as I realize it's him. Elias. But it's not a dream this time. I'm awake.